Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a ride that is, quite frankly, going to shatter a lot of the comfortable illusions we've all been fed over the last few decades.
It's definitely not a book for those who want to, you know, stay inside the matrix, so to speak.
Not at all. We are looking at a book that challenges the very foundation of how we understand progress and gender and really the history of our own civilization.
We are doing a comprehensive breakdown of Moonshot, Rocketry, and Space Exploration Without Women by Conrad Riker. And right off the bat, I have to say, this is the kind of analysis that, well, it usually gets suppressed.
Oh, absolutely. This is the stuff that gets filtered out. Before we even, crack the spine on this thing, I want to tell everyone listening, if you appreciate us bringing you these unfiltered, raw, deep dives, you need to hit that like and subscribe button right now.
Please do. It is the only way we can keep doing this. It helps us bypass the gatekeepers.
Okay, so let's get into it. The hook. Riker's premise is incredibly bold.
And for many, it's going to be incredibly controversial. He's basically arguing that the conquest of space, putting boots on the moon, the whole technological leap of the 20th century, wasn't just a human achievement.
He argues it was specifically a masculine achievement.
Yes, and not in a social boys club kind of way. He means it biologically.
Right.
He frames this book as a manifesto for the rational man. He's looking at what he calls the cold equations of biology and history.
And his central thesis is that our institutions have been captured.
Captured by a narrative that ignores biological reality. He argues that the traits required to, say, sit on top of a Saturn V rocket aggression, extreme risk tolerance, emotional stoicism, are distinctly biologically male traits.
And he's saying that by pathologizing these traits, calling them toxic,
We are effectively grounding our civilization. We're not just hurting men, we're hurting progress itself.
it's a heavy claim. It's almost like saying we're trying to run a Ferrari on cooking oil because we're afraid of gasoline.
That's a good way to put it. And the mission for this deep dive is to unpack Riker's argument piece by piece. We're going to look at the biology, the history, the economics.
And seriously, we can only cover so much here. If you want the full, uncensored experience, and there is a lot of data we just can't fit in, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and buy the ebook. It's Moonshot by Conrad Riker.
And you should also follow him on Substack. It's at Conrad Riker. He goes even deeper there.
Okay, let's start with the biology. Riker opens with testosterone. He calls it rocket fuel.
He does. And he's not just talking about lifting weights. He cites the data showing men produce, 15 to 20 times more testosterone than women?
But his focus isn't physical, it's psychological.
Exactly, the neurological impact. He argues this massive chemical difference drives a fundamental divergence, the urge to take existential risks.
And he links this to the Savannah principle. Walk us through that.
This is really the bedrock of his whole argument. Riker says that for 99% of human history, there was this strict do-or-die division of labor.
Men were the resource factories.
Right. The hunters, the defenders,
Yeah.
they were designed to go out into the chaos, face death, and bring something back, extract value.
While women were the life factories.
The nurturers, the protectors of the next generation.
Yeah.
Riker's point is that you can't just undo millions of years of selective pressure with, a few decades of HR policies.
He argues men are biologically hardwired for risk, women for safety.
Yes. And he uses some pretty intense primate comparisons to back this up.
The baboon study really stood out to me.
That was from the University of Pennsylvania. And he leans on it heavily because it sort of strips away the social construct argument.
Right.
They observed baboon troops during severe droughts, so high stress, resource scarce environments. The groups that were organized around these rigid, dominant male hierarchies, they secured 70% more water sources.
70%. I mean, that's a massive survival advantage.
Huge. And the more egalitarian groups, the ones with flatter social structures.
They had a 60% mortality rate.
Exactly. Riker's takeaway is blunt. Nature doesn't care about fairness or feelings. It cares about who brings home the water before the infants dehydrate. What we call toxic masculinity, he calls a survival mechanism.
But in the modern world, that mechanism is being jammed, which brings us to what he calls the toxic masculinity double bind.
This is something I think a lot of men listening will recognize immediately. Riker argues modern society has created this trap.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Pretty much. Our institutions still rely on men to perform that provider-protector role when a crisis hits. We want them to be decisive, stoic.
But we punish them for the very traits required to be those things.
Precisely. If a male leader is too aggressive, he's toxic. But if he steps back, shows vulnerability, he's labeled weak or unambitious. He uses the example of Dennis Muilenburg, the former Boeing CEO.
Right after the 737 MX crashes.
Muilenburg went before Congress and he showed emotion. He choked up. And in the modern narrative, you'd think he'd be applauded for his emotional intelligence.
But the market punished him. The stock dropped 19%.
The market saw it as weakness. Riker contrasts this with what he calls the Swiss bank solution.
I thought that was a fascinating concept he introduced.
It's based on his study of successful power marriages. He argues that high-functioning men don't actually share their vulnerability with the world. They channel it exclusively to their wives, behind closed doors.
Like a secret Swiss bank account.
Yes. They maintain a firewall of total competence for the public because they know the world will eat them alive if they don't.
And this stoicism, he argues, isn't a defect, it's a strategy, and it was the secret sauce of the space race. He calls it ice-cool competence.
Which is a great transition into history. He looks at the Mercury 7, the Apollo era, as institutions before they were, as he puts it, softened.
The right stuff, it wasn't just piloting skill, was it?
No, it was a specific form of emotional suppression. I mean, these men were test pilots. They saw friends die in fireballs and just went to work the next day. They weren't sitting in circles talking about their trauma.
He compares Apollo 13 to modern crisis management. We all know failure is not an option, but he brings up the biomedical data.
This is incredible stuff. NASA monitored their vitals. And Riker points out that when the oxygen tank blew, when death was a very real, immediate possibility, the crew's cortisol levels, their stress hormones,
They dropped.
they dropped. They got calmer as they got closer to death.
He argues that's a biological anomaly specific to the male hunter phenotype.
Right. When the threat appears, the brain switches from anxiety to pure problem solving. And he contrasts that with modern data on mixed gender teams.
The simulations.
He cites studies where, in high-stress simulations, mixed-gender crews saw group stress markers rise by 40% during emergencies. He blames this on consensus-seeking emotional monitoring. It slows things down.
He tells that story about the CO2 scrubbers on Apollo 13 fixing a square cartridge into a round hole.
Using socks and duct tape, that was an all-male engineering team on the ground. Riker's analysis is that they solved it because they were focused entirely on the mechanics.
Not on tone or whose idea was being heard or if everyone felt included.
They were worried about CO2 levels. It leads to his line, committees replace competence.
And when you introduce committees into engineering, people die. He brings up the Columbia shuttle disaster.
This is a scathing part of the book. He attributes Columbia's loss not just to falling foam, but to the bureaucracy and inclusion quotas that had taken over NASA by then.
He argues a feminized leadership culture pushed for consensus. Let's wait and see, instead of listening to the engineers who wanted to image the wing.
And he even brings up the space station Freedom toilet malfunction.
This sounds like a joke, but he treats it as a serious example.
It's a serious engineering point. The toilet malfunction. The female astronaut struggled with the repair. An all-male team had to redesign the whole system. He uses it to say that sometimes biological differences in, say, spatial reasoning are just facts of life.
If you ignore them for ideology, your toilet breaks. Or worse.
Or your heat shield fails. Which leads him to the economic cost of all this. This is where the get woke, go broke crowd will really tune in.
He talks about Sweden.
The Swedish data is quite condemning in his view. Sweden is the poster child for gender-neutral policies, right? But he cites studies showing that after they pushed hard for mandatory paternity leave, it actually slowed their GDP growth. But the personal cost to men was even higher.
The 22% permanent career damage statistic.
Exactly. Men who took the full paternity leave saw their lifetime earnings trajectory flatten. But here's the kicker.
Their divorce rates went up.
Their divorce rates went up. They did what society told them to do, and their wives, according to the data he presents, left them.
He suggests that despite what women say they want,
There's a biological drive for the provider. When men step out of that role, attraction plummets. He calls it a libido crash from evolutionary mismatch. It's the red pill in chart form.
and this plays out on a bigger scale too, in the military and dangerous jobs.
It's what he calls survival math. When the chips are down, society reverts to factory settings. In Ukraine, men aged 18 to 60 couldn't leave. They had to fight.
While women and children were evacuated.
And he points out that 93 to 97% of workplace deaths are male. We send men to die in coal mines, on oil rigs, on front lines, because Biologically speaking,
Men are the expendable sex.
men are the expendable sex. He argues civilization is built on a bargain. Men accept expendability in exchange for respect. His warning is that if you take away the respect, if you call their nature toxic, but keep the expendability.
The bargain breaks, and civilization collapses.
One story that really drove this home for me was the Biosphere 2 anecdote. I hadn't heard this perspective on it before.
The equality paradise.
Right. It was supposed to be this utopia, balanced ratios, shared duties. But according to Riker, it collapsed into chaos. You had the male botanist physically growing the food, keeping the machines running.
While some of the female crewmates were reportedly journaling about microaggressions, and they were starving.
Oxygen was dropping, food was scarce. Riker's point is that when survival is on the line, you don't need feelings, you need calories, you need production. Social engineering always fails when it hits the hard wall of physical engineering.
Which is the perfect segue to the future. Mars. Riker is adamant Mars needs men.
Mars or bust, quite literally. He lays out the physiological case, and it's just pure numbers. He cites NASA metabolic studies claiming a male astronaut requires 3,500 fewer calories per day than a female counterpart.
Relative to labor output.
Relative to labor output.
Yeah.
Men eat more, but they produce significantly more foot-pounds of labor per calorie. When it costs $10,000 to ship a pound of food to Mars, that matters.
But the bigger issue is radiation.
The sterilization risk. Space is a radioactive nightmare. Riker notes that the radiation on a Mars mission would permanently sterilize a woman. The ovaries are just too sensitive.
So if you actually want to colonize, you can't send women on the first ships.
Not unless you want them to be unable to have children when they arrive. And this leads to his most provocative prediction, the uterus vessel concept.
Yeah, explain that one. That sounded like something out of a sci-fi dystopia.
Riker argues that on a Mars colony, roles will revert to strict biological functions for survival. He predicts birth certificates will eventually list the father as colonist or builder and the mother as uterus vessel.
That is chilling.
His point is, in a colony of 100 people, if you lose 10 men, you can still maintain population growth. If you lose 10 women, the colony dies. Therefore, women's value becomes almost entirely reproductive.
And he sees the new space race leaders, Musk, Bezos, as proof that this old way is coming back.
He calls them the new space barons. He frames them as modern manifestations of that masculine impulse to build and explore. Look at Elon Musk. The guy slept on the factory floor, invested his last millions into SpaceX.
That's the male risk engine he talks about.
And he links it back to testosterone. That drive to build a legacy, to conquer, to build a monument. It's not about safety, it's about immortality. The reason NASA stalled for 50 years, he argues, is it became a jobs program focused on inclusion. The reason SpaceX is landing boosters is it's run by a man with a conqueror mindset.
So let's unpack what this all means for the listener. Riker is basically saying, stop apologizing.
He is. He's telling men that the civilization they live in, the bridges the rockets, rests on masculine shoulders. He has this poetic but dark line. Stars are tombstones for civilizations that ignored biology.
Meaning, if we keep prioritizing feelings over physics, we're never getting off this rock.
Precisely. If we pathologize the traits that built the Saturn V, the aggression, the stoicism, we lose the capability to build the next one. We might have a nicer society, but it will be one that's slowly decaying.
It's a call to embrace that nature, not suppress it.
It's a call to action. Riker's challenge to you, the listener, is this. If society continues to demonize the builders, who is going to build the bridges to the stars? Who's going to do the dirty, dangerous work if we tell them their very nature is toxic?
It's a question that forces you to confront the reality of how the world actually works, not how we might wish it worked. Look, we've covered a lot, but the book goes into way more detail. You really need to read it.
Seriously, go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books and grab Moonshot by Conrad Riker. We only scratched the surface.
And don't forget his Substack. It's at Conrad Riker. He does a lot of analysis on current events through this biological lens there. It's worth a follow.
Absolutely. The truth is out there, gentlemen. Sometimes you just have to be willing to read the cold equations.
Before we sign off, make sure you've liked this deep dive and subscribed. We're going to keep diving into these forbidden topics, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.